Basically what I want to say is if you're thinking about buying shocks, sometimes it isn't best to go with the one that has more bells or whistles or that costs the most. Alright, today's tech tip is going to be on shocks. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and voodoo involved in shocks. You're probably wondering why I've got a 3-minute egg timer, a digital timer, and a watch, and what that has to do with shocks. Well, basically the best way I thought to explain it is you can think of a shock as a timer, because that's basically what a shock does. It dampens and times suspension of events. So in drag racing, it's more of a timing of suspension events in your car that we use shock absorbers for. So again, what does a 3-minute egg timer, a digital timer, and a Rolex have to do with shock absorbers? You can buy this for about $1 at any dollar store. You can get this on Amazon for about 10 bucks. And this is a Rolex. You can guess how much it costs. What that has to do with shocks, any one of these things will work to cook a 3-minute egg, and you'll have a perfect 3-minute egg. You can use this, flip it over. When the sand runs out, you've got a perfect 3-minute egg. It's a timer. You can set this. It's got a lot more bells and whistles. It'll tell you the time. It'll time your egg. It'll be a stopwatch. It'll do all of that. It's about 12 bucks. This is a Rolex. It's got a second hand and a stopwatch. You can time your 3-minute egg with that, and it looks good when you wear it, and it costs a lot of money. And that's how shocks are. Basically what I want to say is if you're thinking about buying shocks, sometimes it isn't best to go with the one that has more bells or whistles or that costs the most. Know your knowledge of suspension. Know your knowledge of what shock absorbers do. If you're not familiar with what a shock absorber does, how it works, and what the dampening functions are, maybe you shouldn't go for the shock that has high and low speed valving, that has 50 clicks of extension and 60 clicks of rebound and compression. So you should probably look for a shock that's a little bit more in your knowledge range instead of buying the most expensive shock. I know it sounds bad for somebody that sells shock absorbers, and we sell everybody shock absorbers. And when I sell a $5,000 set of shocks, I make a lot more money than when I sell a $600 set of shocks. But that doesn't help you, my customer. I have a lot of customers that I've built their car, and their knowledge of shocks is just middle of the road. And I set them up with a shock that they can understand when they're at the racetrack. They don't want something that they're going to waste a lot of time going in one direction, turning 20 or 30 clicks, and find out they went the absolute wrong direction and have to start back from where they were and go in the other direction. So I always give them a set of shocks that are comparable with their knowledge. You can valve any set of shocks so that the clamping force is almost identical on any set of shocks. And then you have more adjustment measures in between in order for you to fine-tune your shock absorber. But if you don't know what you're doing or you're unsure of what you're doing, it might better serve you to spend a little bit less money and have a shock absorber that's a little bit easier for you to adjust and understand. So this is part 1 of a 2-part series. We'll get a little bit further into shock absorber tech and explain the clamping force and the dampening, the extension and the rebound. So stay tuned for part 2, but I just wanted to give this little example that you can spend a little bit of money or a lot of money on shock absorbers, but they basically do the same thing. They time suspension events and dampen. So stay tuned for part 2.